today I wanted to get into, we can just go right into it. I really wanted to break down personality types, and I know there's a very broad spectrum of personalities, but I wanted to focus on the exact definitions of these different personality types. And there's a lot of cross patterns we can, discuss regards to training, because you're a
Right.
person who trains a lot. I train, it's my life. And I think you have to have certain blends of these personality types within you. And I know without reading this, I kind of assumed, people would talk about different personality types. And I said, wait a minute, I have that trait. And it would make the wheels start to turn. I'm like, uh-oh, am I like, a crazy person? And my friends would say, yes,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
right. But I know that, like when people talk about like, person's this or sociopath or a narcissist, like it's a spectrum, man. Some people live in the core and some people are on the, do narcissistic things, which is, I know I've certainly fallen guilty to at times. I think we all do. But what would you say are the personality types that are the most, not prolific, but most popular and well known in society that people love to discuss? Is there a bucket?
Yeah. So I think, well, I'm a clinical and a forensic psychologist. So most of my work has been with inmates and serial
Hmm.
killers, sex offenders, psychopaths, gangbangers, you name it. That being said, you have to be trained in overall general psychology before you go into that specialty.
Hmm.
So people love discuss, true crime is super popular, and people love discussing the more pathological personality types. I'll say the narcissists, the psychopaths, um, you know, uh, and these are considered disordered personalities, right? So these are
Right, right,
not,
right, right.
borderline personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, which is essentially criminal. But like we were talking about before, everything is on a spectrum. I have bits of narcissism and probably psychopathy too,
Hmm.
as you might. The
Of course.
difference is that I think people who learn to channel those traits into something that benefits them versus something that is destructive.
Hmm.
So, narcissism, it's good to have a little bit of narcissism, to have some self-esteem, to know that you matter.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Too much, however, thinking you're better than, stepping on other people to get your needs met, that's when it becomes a problem,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know? So,
Hmm.
but again, these are disorders that I'm really talking about. Um,
Hmm.
I was looking up some articles on motivation for exercise, because you brought up a good point. You said, what, how come some people get up and do it and some people don't? And that's such an interesting question, because I think it varies so greatly.
Yeah, yeah.
um, for me, it was ingrained really early in my life, and I'm thankful to my parents for that. They threw me in gymnastics at like 7 or something. um, and it was automatic. You go to school, you go to gymnastics, and then I climbed a higher level. So then it was get up at 4 a.m.,
Yeah,
train till 7. Go. I mean, you can relate to this. Go
yeah,
to school, train again, and do it again the next day, and it becomes part of your identity.
yeah. I think, I mean, just thinking back, I know you're very young, but regardless, it was a long time ago. Do you remember fighting it? Like, because
Oh
I
yeah.
have I have a son now, and everyone's like, "Is he going to play sports?" And I always say, I like him to be in sports for the structure, but I don't need him to be a great athlete. If he wants to pursue it and continue, that's great. But if he doesn't, I just want him to be a good person. But I want him to have the structure that sports provide. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. First of all, your son is absolutely gorgeous, and I get
Thank you.
that. I think that when I was a teenager, I was a, I was not a good teenager. I was a problematic teenager. I went at it with my mother. I experimented with stuff. I did not listen. I got in trouble. I think that one of the reasons that I didn't end up on the other side of the fence, to be quite honest, and when I say the fence, because I work in correctional facilities, is
Mm-hmm.
because of sports. Because I played basketball in high school, I had to be at practice. I had teammates and friends that were counting on me. So it didn't, team sports is another area, right?
Right, right,
And
right.
you know that because when you have team sports, you can't be that selfish. I remember one time I got to basketball practice and I had just smoked weed, not proud of this. And, I am human. And my teammate and friend, who's still my friend to this day, said, you can't even run properly because you're high. And I was like, F you, typical 15-year-old. And then I left there thinking, she's right. I let her down. I let my team down. I was not practicing properly. There's a built-in responsibility in team sports that I personally love.
Mm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, look, it doesn't have to be forever, but I think every young person should experience a team sport and an individual sport. Team sports, and it doesn't make you bad if you can't play a team sport. It just, you have to understand that sometimes there are bigger things other than yourself, and there's a greater cause other than yourself, and sometimes it's nice to be accountable to other people to make sure that, I'm going to follow through on what I said I was going to do. And without those sports, and now just a little bit of pressure from the people that surround you or your teammates, it can be very helpful. And quite often, the structure at times that people actually do need in their lives. And I've seen people in the team environments that provide structure. Then I've seen them step out of it. I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. In college, when I was playing college football, everyone said, wow, it's really hard to balance academics and athletics. And for me, it was much easier because it's athletics and academics, nothing else. So after football, it was study hall, it was tutors, it was studying, and that's it. The athletes that discontinued sports and decided not to play football said, I'm going to focus on academics. Guess what happened?
Their
There was
academics went down.
Oh, they got crushed. There
Yeah.
was no structure, and they thought they were going to give all that time and focus. Now they had all that time and focus to do things that weren't structured and weren't productive, and all of a sudden their grades plummet, and they thought they would have more time, and everything went through the floor. And I thought it was a very interesting study.
No, I think that makes total sense. I could easily see that happening to me because when I quit basketball, it was kind of the same thing. Structure for me is essential, and I think for a lot of people, like I work with juvenile delinquents. I hate that word, and I ask them.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions I ask them is, What do you do after school?" And they're
Mm-hmm.
in juvenile hall. What do you do after
Right,
school?
right, right, right.
I watch TikTok. I watch YouTube. I play video
Mm-hmm.
games. And I literally get like internally frustrated because I'm like, damn, even if the socioeconomic status is an issue, which it is, a lot of low socioeconomic kids end up in juvie. I'm thinking there's the park, there's the YMCA, there's Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and I just want to like say, sports saved my life so many
Yeah,
times. And
yeah.
one of the reasons, shout out to my trainer Miguel, who's been consistent and never canceled on me once in 3 years. One of the reasons I get up sometimes is because Miguel says, be here at 9. And it's not just about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying he can't do something else or book another client, but somebody's, it's, and it's a microcosm for the world.
Right,
Other people count on you. The way we move through the world is the same way. It's not just about me. I have to care about other people. If I don't care about other people, why am I even here?
right. No, and I've heard that many times. The greatest I guess, not only acts of service, but one of the greatest feelings in the world is knowing that you helped someone else out, find their way. And shout out to Miguel. Dr. Haji said something that was quick, but he hasn't canceled on her in 3 years.
Never.
Now, I certainly know trainers like that. Um, and I know Miguel is an extraordinary human being, and who he is as a person is way more important than who he is as a body architect at anatomy. But he is incredibly reliable, and he cares a great deal. And the fact that he never cancels shows you how much he cares. People say, "Well, I care too." Well, what you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you're saying. Like, care is an action. I believe that
Agreed.
in my heart. And Miguel shows with his actions. We have many body architects on the team at every location that care a great deal, but Miguel is a wonderful example of caring a great deal. And I know you think the world of him. You guys are very close, but I'm super happy for him because he's been thriving and he's a wonderful, once again, example of what a body architect should be. So.
Yeah, I concur. And it speaks volumes because if somebody else is willing to hold me accountable to that standard, then I need to hold myself accountable to that standard. I mean, of course, he's changed times and stuff, life happens, but I told him the other day, I said, we've been training 3 years and you've never canceled on me, not once. And that there's something to be said for that because that's a long time.
Oh yeah. And I just love that foundational pillar of show up. And Dr. Haji, so many call it speeches, messages. I think, look, what you do once you're there is important. That goes without saying. But if you can't show up, I mean, that's everything. The people who get what they want are the ones who show up to get it. And I remember being a very young boy, and my mother said, "You always go to school." And I knew kids to the right and left. They would just sometimes they showed up, sometimes they didn't. My mother, she had this awesome trick. She would say, "If you don't feel good, that's fine. Go to school, and if you're not feeling good at 12, I'll come pick you up early."
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, "Well, the day's over by 12, right?"
That's slick.
Yeah, she tricked me. I never missed a day of school ever, ever, because she would say, even if I felt horrible, she would get me up. She'd like get me to that school. I would say used to look back on it and tell, kind of irresponsible, mom, but it was super funny how that was the precedent. You show up and keep showing up and keep showing up, and the consistency is powerful. It's really powerful.
No, she did you a huge service. I remember first time I got my heart broken, I was 15 and my boyfriend cheated on me. And the pain was excruciating. Your first heartbreak, and people say it's puppy love, but it's not. And I was so heartbroken. I was crying, and you revert into a little kid. And my mother let me stay home for one day, and I was devastated. And the next day, she said, "Okay, get up." And I was like, I just got my heart broken. I just got cheated on. What do you mean get up? And she was like, yeah, I let you stay home. I let you cry. And now you have to get up. And I was like, but he's at school. He's there. And the people and, peer, you're thinking about your peers so much at that age. And I thought my mother was the most evil person for making me get up and go to school while my whole life is crumbling. That's how it felt at age 15. Mm-hmm. And what a big lesson my mother did for me. You're hurting and it sucks and life is not going your way, but you're going to get up and face it. And that stayed with me, 40 years later. That's what a gift.
Oh, it is.
I hated her for it, but it was a gift.
It's so funny. Parents, I'm learning the hard way, and I haven't even started yet, really, because he's so young. But parents often bear the burden of being the bad guy or the grim reaper with the messages, but you're not going to feel good, but they need the lessons. It just is what it is.
Right.
Learning the hard way. So to go back to what we were discussing earlier, Dr. Haji, I know there's a lot of factors that come into, there's people, we were talking about training, people that show up and people that just will find every reason to not show up. Is there certain personality types that, you mentioned the young men that you work with? I think having something, once again, bigger than yourself is important, but still it's personality based, because that might work for me, work for you. So if there are certain personalities that you're like the Energizer Bunny, you just wind them up and they just go and nothing's stopping them. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and so I was looking up this theory I think it's called self-determination theory, and it talks about intrinsic motivators, internal motivators versus extrinsic motivators. And we live in Miami, right? And let's be honest, Miami has at times a very superficial component, a very look at me, this is what I have, this is, and then there's the kind of the plastic surgery culture, which I'm not knocking, do whatever makes you happy, but there is a very vain component to a lot of neighborhoods in Miami. And in one respect, that can push people. God, she looks great, I want to look like her. Or look at him, his legs keep growing, I want to do more squats.
Of
And
course.
in another way, it can kind of have the opposite effect of like, God, I feel so ugly compared to this person, or I feel so less than, or they look so much better than me, let me give up. So what is the difference between somebody who gets motivated and who doesn't get motivated? Well, I think there are a lot of factors when it comes to personality traits. Is it something that, they say intrinsic motivation is more of a determining factor than an extrinsic motivation, right?
Yeah.
People, I want to look good. I want to look good. When people say, I want to look good because summer's coming up. Well, I want to look good when winter's coming up. I want to look good,
Right.
not just for the bikini, but for me, it they say that people who make it almost a part of their personality, which of course that can also go to a pathological obsessive level, but like if
Mhm.
you ask somebody, I'm a runner, uh, I'm a runner is means that is part of your identity. That is part of your value system. You have to run. I'm a gym rat,
Of course.
or it becomes part of who you are. And I think that can be a good thing, barring those who are like obsessive and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I also find that for me personally in my life, athleticism has been a constant, and I thank God for that. Thank God I have my health. Thank God thank God I'm able to get up and do that stuff, and I'm healthy and all that stuff. But
For
it's
sure.
ebbed and flowed. There were times in my life where I was bordering on obsessive. I mean, I used to work out 4 to 6 hours a day, kickbox, lift,
Right.
run, check in the mirror all the time. I was in college. Yeah,
So I gotta stop you.
yeah,
So um, I think we all have those moments in our life where we go beast mode, but at that point, no, you know you better than you're an expert on you. We're not really training. Like we said, Miami is superficial. I agree with you, but I use the word Miami is very aesthetic based, like aesthetic based. So how we look is very important to whatever we represent, whatever we're in, whatever we do, the circles we're in. You don't see a lot of out of shape people in Miami. It's very rare. And one of my mentors told me once, when you see a very fit person, that means that they at the very least know how to commit to something. They know how to be consistent to something, and they know how to be dedicated. And that's a representation of who you are. So what you do speaks so loud, I can't hear what you're saying because I'm looking at you. That doesn't mean you
mm,
don't see very successful people who are out of shape, certainly not. But is a large piece of the pie that shows that they have some sense of discipline.
agreed.
Yeah. With that, you said you were working out 7, 8 hours a day, 3, 4 times a day. Now, I personally experienced that because I was numbing myself to yeah. When I finished playing football, what I was trying to do was replicate my football day, which was like an 8 hour day. I would get up, I would run 4 miles, I would swim 2 miles, I would bike for an hour, I would run for 30 minutes, whatever, I would lift weights. Then I take a boxing class, then I take a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu class, whatever it is, just to numb myself because I didn't want to deal
Yep.
with the heartbreak of football breaking up with me.
Hmm.
And I was numbing myself completely. So, what were you experiencing, and why do you think you were doing that to that level?
So I was actually, I don't mind self-disclosure. I was diagnosed with major depression when I was 9 years old. It runs in my
Mhm.
family. My father has struggled with depression. I mean, and let me clarify. People use the word depression and anxiety very loosely these days. I'm talking
Okay.
about, you know, clinical depression where you physically cannot motivate. You're having passive suicidal thoughts.
Mhm.
You just, crying spells. I'm talking clinical depression,
Okay.
not just,
Okay.
people just say, I'm depressed, I'm depressed. And it's like, no, you don't understand what that means. A neurological imbalance. Um, and And then I also got diagnosed with panic disorder, where I used to have these out of nowhere heart palpitations, shaking, sweating, shortness of breath. I mean, I used to drive myself to the ER, and the doctors used to know me by first name and say, Lina, we don't know how many times to tell you nothing's wrong with you. You're having a panic attack. And I think that sports and working out became a coping mechanism. But in the same way that you were kind of dealing with the heartbreak of being done with football,
Right.
it was the same with me. It was an adaptive coping mechanism that turned into a maladaptive coping mechanism,
Okay.
because it was like at one point, I'll be honest, it became very akin to drugs and alcohol. It was, I'm
Oh
going to
my
work
God.
out. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It was
Oh yeah.
like going ham, and my friends were like, you also need to socialize, and then the dieting, not that I wouldn't say I had like an eating disorder, but it was like egg whites and kale and
Oh yeah.
spinach and just like,
Right. Right. Right.
almost depriving myself, like almost,
Oh, of course.
almost
Of course.
punishment, almost like a punitive shame, where like, and I love chocolate, I love carbs, I love,
But you're not in that state. You're not looking at it, and you're not touching it. Are you crazy? I'm
no,
not doing that. No
no.
way. No way.
And I just turned 46. I don't normally say that, but I just turned 46, and I think one of the great life lessons of having gone through those ebbs and flows is learning about moderation. That
Mm-hmm.
and that moderation, sometimes after I train, when we go, he'll buy me a chocolate chip cookie, and I'll be like, "What kind of trainer are you?" And he's like, "No, you've been doing well, and you deserve the cookie." And
That's great.
I think that's a good, it's a good thing. He won't do it often, and he tells me, make sure you eat your protein, but it's a good, moderation is essential, but I don't think sometimes we learn that until later in life.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I have a good friend, Amanda Franco, who is just an incredible person, but she also went back to school to study to be, a certified nutritionist and just be, highly educated in the field. And she would always, what she discusses is basically, don't deprive yourself of certain things. There's a way to have a good life, eat with some sense of normalcy,
Yeah.
And get great results, because she trains as well. And so shout out to Amanda for putting that content out there and all that good stuff out there. But I think that not allowing yourself to do certain things, and I, after football ended for me, I I weighed about 245 pounds roughly. I became so obsessed with training and nutrition, like to a fault, like negative completely, like not positive, terrible. I got down to 177 pounds, and I have pictures.
And you're
I haven't
tall.
shown, yeah, I haven't shown the pictures yet. Right now, I'm about 205, 206. So that's a lot of weight, right? And I was like, not good. But I would train. I mean, I'm training all day on half a chicken breast.
Yeah,
It's a,
right.
it
And
was
you talked about
addictive.
avoidance. I
Yeah,
was,
yeah.
I would kickbox for 4 hours in a row, and even my sensei, or whatever he was called, was like, "You have to go home," and I was like,
Yeah,
"No,"
yeah, right, right,
because if
right,
I go home, I now have to be with my thoughts, and some
right.
of them are unpleasant and unlikable. And at that age, I didn't know how to sit in that or address that. So for me, it became a maladaptive coping skill because I took it too far.
Hmm.
So part of it, it saved my life, and I ended up being okay. And there's a reason I decided to become a psychologist. And they say
Of
people with
course.
mental health are crazy,
Yeah.
but I think it's something I had to go through. Probably you had to go through it too, to realize,
Oh yeah, for
wait,
sure.
this isn't this isn't the way I want to be forever.
Right, right. It's exhausting. It's exhausting. It makes you tired. It makes you irritable. It makes you not feeling well. And everyone says, "Oh, I don't judge myself, and I'm not too hard on myself." And I look at people, I'm like, "Yeah, because you're doing the cycle now. I'm watching you.
Yeah,
Like they're I don't care about superficial things, and they got the really expensive watch and really expensive car and all, and there's nothing wrong with those things at all. But when it dominates your life and you must have them, and then on the other side of your mouth you're saying those things really don't matter. Well, if they didn't matter, you wouldn't have them. I mean, it's very simple,
Right.
right? It's very simple. With training for me, I realized that number one, this is no way to go through life. Number two, that I cannot coach it, preach it, teach it if I don't get my own house in order.
Hmm.
And these are my experiences. I'm not going to put them on anyone else. And I have responsibility to myself to actually address the things that are causing me
Yeah.
to work, train like that, to push myself like that. And that's not a normal place to live. But
Right.
wait, it comes from a place that was programmed into my head with sports. The person that's on the football field is the most aggressive,
Right.
angry, frustrated, comes from a challenged set of circumstances. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about you could be loaded and come from an abusive home. And guess what? You have a fire inside you that's rage that comes out when you're on that football field. And all of a sudden, wow, he plays with so much energy. It's not energy, it's anger. And
That
that
is
anger,
so
yeah,
interesting that you say
yeah,
that. I have
yeah.
my friend is a sports psychologist. He was the sports psychologist for the 49ers, actually the Florida Panthers too. I might be outing him right now, but I he used to work in corrections with me. So I was like, how do you go from inmates to athletes? And he's like, believe it or not, they're very similar.
Oh, are you kidding me? Yeah. I
Yeah.
remember when I was with the Bengals, no names, but my linebacker coach, I said, man, I said, this guy is such a savage. How does he play like that? I mean, I've never seen a tougher dude in my life. And the coach looks over at me and he says, hey, Mark, if so and so wasn't playing football in the NFL, he'd be running cell block 4.
I
And
can
he
see
was,
that.
and I was like, yeah, he would, because they're not exactly soft human beings. I mean, some of these guys, I mean, you know the stories. They got some stuff going on. Let's be honest, right? And it is
Yeah.
what it is.
Yeah, and I think it's great that professional, sports organizations are getting more into addressing mental health. I don't know how it was when you were playing, but yeah. So he said, he was a correctional psychologist like me, and then he was a sports psychologist, and he shared some of the stories, without breaking anonymity. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's abuse, there's domestic violence, there's substance abuse, there's rage, there's depression, there's anxiety, there's a lot that these athletes that he deals with, and thank God for sports psychologists that we don't hear about. I'm
Mhm.
obsessed with the Knicks. I was watching the Knicks last night, and I'm easy the person on the couch with the popcorn who's like, come on dude, how could you miss that three? That's ridiculous. That's not I'm that person, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And when I'm a Knicks fan, I'm not a psychologist thinking,
Right,
I
right,
don't know if
right,
this guy had a bad day or if his mother
right, right.
just died or if something's, I'm a fan. That's it.
Of
And,
course,
and
of course.
and we don't
Um,
think about that until it hits the news. Oh,
mhm.
such and such, beat the crap out of his wife, and it's like, whoa, that came out of left field. But for you guys, it didn't come out of left field. I'm assuming there are red flags, or maybe it
No,
did.
well, two quick things. When I was in high school, there was a book that came out called Pros and Cons, and
Okay.
it talks about every professional athlete. I can't remember if it just focused on football, but it was every professional athlete who's ever been arrested and why. And it
Oh, I
was
gotta
like,
get that.
then the top guys were like, boom, 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 boom. It's like, this is not a normal person, and normal, I don't know
Yeah.
what your definition is, but you know what I mean. It's
Yeah.
like this guy is like, and what I would equate it to when people would ask me about sports, I said, look, call it whatever you want. But when I was growing up, there were certain circumstances that didn't rub me the right way. Okay? It didn't feel good. It was frustrating. Yes, it angered me. I didn't like it. Call it whatever you want. But when I was playing sports, that's what I would tap into to
Mm.
not only go, but to keep going. So when I would explain this to parents or other people years later, I would say, you have to understand that no one, no one has the ability to focus and give that type of angered effort. It's just not normal. So there's a fuel source that they're tapping
Right.
into. They need that fuel source because you can't coach that. They either have it or they don't. And the ones who don't, that means that, you know what? Kudos to their parents because they're stable and they're good.
Right.
They're well balanced or centered. I just wasn't, you know, and it took me, not like I've arrived. I say this all the time, but I still work on it because you know what? I think about those circumstances and it pushes me to keep going and be my very best because I don't want to experience that again. I don't want my family or my son to experience that. And you need some sense of fuel to pull from. But I will tell you that that's not something that works out in perpetuity. That's a short period of
Right.
time. And then you got to fix that or start working on it because that will be your demise, really.
Right. And like I'm a very go hard or go home person. I always have
Mhm.
been. And
Mhm.
I used to wear that as a badge of honor. You know, I'm a go hard or go home. I did it with school, all the way, I did it with sports. I was when I was a gymnast, I was, competing at the national level, and Olympics was a potential thing. And I did it with kickboxing. I did it with hot yoga. I would hot yoga like 7 days a week, twice a day. And
That's
it's
brutal.
like,
Brutal.
and my mentor used to tell me, you're really missing the point of yoga. Like, it's not to be the most flexible and the most,
I'm gonna
the
win.
biggest, yeah. And I'm like, no, no, for me it is. You don't understand. I need my splits to be like, and it took a long, and I still struggle with it, if I don't work out 6 days a week, I can sometimes beat myself up. But in the flip sense, the go hard or go home has also worked for me. I managed to get through school, and sometimes I had, no gas money and no dinner, but it was like, I'm
Right.
studying anyway, I don't care, and
Yeah.
so taking the go hard or go home and trying to tone it into that middle area, it's a challenge for me, even to this day. But I don't want to get rid of it fully because I know it served me. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's. I went to an event back home. I'm from Fall River, Massachusetts,
Oh,
and I ran into a guy in the city. He's a former football player, and he was like a legend. And I like looked up to him growing up. And we're sitting down. We're sitting at this bar in this restaurant, just talking, and he says, you know, we were talking about what it's like to be from Fall River. And sometimes it gets a bad rap because it's right smack dab in the middle of New Bedford and Brockton. It's a tougher area. Call it what you will. And I said, you know, sometimes like I tell people I'm from Boston, right? I said, because they don't know Fall River. And then when they hear that, they go, that's kind of, if you've heard of it, you kind of know a little bit about it. And he says, you know, Mark, it's good to tame Fall River and to evolve. Like it's life, you have to. But it's good to have Fall River in your back pocket because every once in a while, the Fall River has to come out of you. And
mm-hmm.
you're going to need it because it can also be something that helps you. Because a lot of people don't understand the way that city moves and what it is. But it's also stand up for yourself, be proud,
Yeah.
but be respectful and understand that you have to do your very best no matter what's in front of you. But he always said, keep it in your back pocket because you may need that. So, as you said, the things that for athletes, when you have the ability to have something like that in your back pocket, it can be extraordinary. But the tricky part is once you step over that line, you have to turn it off.
Yeah.
And so few, including myself, could turn it off. And it took me decades to go, you know what? That served me from youth to professional sports. But the second professional sports ended, I said, what am I doing? Like, I have to like fix this. Otherwise, I'm going to be a mental midget and I'm going to be like someone who can't control their emotions.
Yeah. But
Not-
it's amazing that you had insight into that, and I think, there's a grieving process, I'm assuming, when you had to stop playing football. right?
And then some. And then some.
And then
Yeah.
some. You know,
Yeah. Right.
because even for me, I never played on a professional level, but I had to stop playing basketball in college because I was great in high school, but in college I was not good. And it was a gut punch, and it was a hit to my ego because I was pretty good in high school, but college, these
Right.
girls were no joke. And so
Mhm.
I didn't make the team. And I had to, and I needed that lesson. I needed it
That's right.
because my head was big, and I thought, whatever. And I think a lot of, you talked about where you're from. I'm from New York, and of course, New Yorkers have to tell everybody they're from New York because it's part of, we have to. It's my identity, and I need you to know that I'm a Knicks fan, and I need you to know
Right.
that I lived in the Bronx, and
Oh,
you talked about people who are motivated to work out versus people who are not motivated to work out. I think sometimes it is also part of my identity. I'm a
for
gym
sure.
rat, and for a while I was a CrossFitter, and for a while I was a yogi, and it becomes, but it is intrinsic because it's part of my value system. I think that we talked about discipline and being accountable and showing up for others, and those are all part of my value system, even outside of the gym. My
Mhm.
whole entire career is devoted to helping people, and particularly forgotten people who that no one cares about. And I need that. I need that to carry on into every area of my life. So I can't be, the psychologist that helps the 19-year-old kid who's serving 5 years for selling weed when, I leave the jail and then I'm a super hypocrite. I'm smoking weed myself, or
Right.
and
Right.
I'm
Right.
not working out, and I'm going through the McDonald's drive-through. Like that doesn't jive with who I am as a person. I think that somebody who exercises regularly, it says a lot about who they are as a person.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
you talk, I called Miami superficial, but you're right. When I walk around my neighborhood, I don't see any obese people. I see a gym on every corner. I see
Right.
juice places on every corner.
That's right. That's
That
right.
that's good for me. That
Right.
that's good
Yeah.
for me. It's a
Yeah. You
culture, like it's a culture.
100%. You are who you surround yourself with, and it's you have a choice, right? There's gyms, there's juice bars, there's healthy eating, there's I think I say this because I'm not big in the nightlife, but
Me neither.
look, I know it exists. I know Miami has great nightlife. I know that the people who do nightlife are amazing at it. But I also know that if you choose not to do that, you can do gyms. Like the people that go to anatomy are the people who like just want to be around like-minded people who appreciate health and wellness, appreciate moving, appreciate being a little bit healthier. That doesn't mean they're perfect. That doesn't mean they don't that they don't smoke weed, or I've seen people vape before and after, but they're doing the best they can while they're there, and I
Yeah.
see it, and I know like they're trying to control what they believe they can control. Some people can, some people can't, and I appreciate the fact that so many people are doing it the way they want to do it, but are moving in the same direction, which is the direction of I want to be a little bit healthier, and maybe that person's vaping today. I know how terrible it is for you, but maybe tomorrow they'll decide to stop. Maybe at
Right.
some point they'll be surrounded by enough people. They go, "What am I doing?" Maybe I hope. I really hope.
Right.
Um, that's the blessing that we have being around all these great fitness, wellness opportunities and experiences. So I think that's really important.
I agree. I think that's one of the I can sit here and bash Miami all day because I'm a New Yorker and that's what we do, but yet I live here. Um,
Mhm.
but at the end of the day, you know, yeah, everyone's in shape. There's a gym on every corner. There's a juice bar on every corner. There's palm trees. There's sun, and yeah, the nightlife. I was a bartender in New York for 10 years, and I saw a lot of stuff. I
Oh, I
did a
can
lot
only.
of stuff.
That's a book. That's a book right there.
It's being a bartender in New York and being a psychologist in prison are the same thing. I did the same
Wow.
thing. I
Wow.
mean, yeah, and at one point, when I hit 30, I realized, because I partied with the celebrities and the VIP, and I did all that, and I realized very sharply, it was kind of one day from to the next, that I realized that was incongruent with who I wanted to be as a human. I'm not
Mhm.
knocking people who engage in nightlife or even recreational drug use. You do what you need to do to live a full life. for me, I saw it very clearly when I turned 30. This is incongruent with who I want to be as a human being.
Right.
And coming up when the sun is coming up, coming down, coming home when the sun is going up and people are running.
Mhm.
That's not who I want to be. But I had
Right.
to live that to know
Right.
that, I think.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, I think you have to experience certain things. I know people, I can think of two people who were straight up serious drug addicts.
Yeah.
And now where they are in their life, they are the most turned around, healthy, focused. I'm talking about training, healthy living, meditation. And, I would agree with you. I think they needed to experience it.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's many people out there that can say no to a lot of things. Once again, what you choose to do is what you choose to do. I, just so you know, on this podcast or me personally, I don't really care what people do.
Right.
Those are your choices. If it's good for you, it's good for you, and you know the definition of good. I don't. For you.
Right.
So, but I think it's easier for some people to say no if you come from that. Like I lost at a very young age, I lost a very close family member to drugs. So in my head as a young person, it was like you touch drugs, you die. Now I get it, that's extreme, but as a young person, that's what I thought. So I'm not doing drugs. I'm just not
Right. But
going to
you
do
could
it.
have gone the other way.
Oh no, for sure. Like some people, you read that thing like two boys of a drug user. One says it's in my genetics. I become a
Right.
drug user. The other one says, well, heck, I'm not doing that, and goes the other way.
Correct.
I was the one who went the other way just because the truth is, Dr. Haji, I was so scared
Yeah.
of what could happen. And I said, that was the ultimate deterrent for me. It really was.
Yeah.
And I saw a lot of kids who didn't have those deterrents who are now or were drug addicts, still alcoholics, still. And I, I don't know. I can only pray that when my son grows up, he's going to have enough information to make decisions that don't put him in a compromised position and don't put him in harm's way. I just don't want, I just want them to understand what it is.
Yeah, that makes me think of a couple of things. Like I told you, when I work with juveniles in the criminal justice system, the ones I see more success with the ones who are on their high school football team or their high
Yeah.
school basketball team.
Yeah.
They'll oh my God, I can't believe I got arrested. I messed up. I wonder if they kick me off the team. I really need to
Right.
get it together. The ones who tell me, yeah, I go home every day and I watch TikTok for literally 4 or 5 hours or play, video games. Those guys, and I literally put it in my reports, in my forensic reports that the judges read. I highly recommend that the juvenile joins an extracurricular activity to understand, to learn structure, learn peer relationships, how to socially interact, and build self-esteem. I put that in all my reports. And I've had a couple lawyers be like, "Is that really necessary?" And yes, it is. Yes, it is. I think that if this 15-year-old was playing basketball after school instead of watching TikTok and smoking weed, I think he'd have better odds of not going back to jail. Yes, I do.
Oh,
I put that in there.
for sure. And it's interesting. I know you brought up, you're talking about kids in the juvenile system and the justice system, but um, he goes home every day and he watches 4 hours of TikTok. That's a young person. That's not just because he's in the juvenile system. That's most young people. And there's a book that I'm listening to now called Anxious Generation
Oh yeah,
by Jonathan Haidt.
I
And
gotta write that. I gotta write these books down.
yeah, Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. And he's saying that there's a reason children shouldn't be touching a phone until they're 16 because they need the foundation of understanding what social skills are, what
Agreed.
it is. And it's not to say that you can't make great money on social media. It's not to say that it's bad. It's just to say there are other things that you need to develop before you delve into that. And he breaks it down. I mean, there's studies and graphs, and the book is loaded with information, but you talked about a young man in the juvenile system, but these are all kids. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you're from a wealthy community. It doesn't matter if you go to a private school, public school. These are just kids in general that need to understand. And just wanted to clarify, Dr. Haji said an extracurricular activity. A lot of these kids do better if they play football, for example. You don't have to play a sport.
Right.
Just commit to something.
Right. Chess club.
Anything. Yeah, chess club. Like you could, like I'm sure a lot of those kids, if they had the right teacher, and I know it's hard because teachers have such a tough job, but if such a tough job, man, they are soldiers, the best people. I mean, so hard. Anyway, if some of those kids had the right guidance, I guarantee their thing could be academics. I mean, it could be academics, no problem. But
Debate team, chess
right.
club, writing poetry. It doesn't matter. I
Mm-hmm.
have a friend who's a chiropractor who told me he's now seeing adolescents with a new, they call it phone neck,
Mm-hmm.
because they're like this all day.
Oh,
That
I'm sure.
literally, like, the spine is like, because
Mhm.
in kids.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, it's tricky. Sometimes we take our son to the park, and we don't have a lot of time. We're working, and we enjoy what we do. Um, but my wife and I, like, sometimes we'll see parents lying down on their phone. They don't even know where the kid is, and I'm thinking, God forbid the kid falls down, or there's a bad person in the area.
Or gets abducted, which,
They're not even paying attention, and I'm thinking, you know, but that's just in the park, Dr. Haji. Like, imagine what it's like everywhere else. If you're always like head down, the kid
yeah,
sees it, and it is what it is.
your
Like,
posture, just your posture alone. I was also thinking about something else, and it's a little bit off topic, but I worked in prisons for a very long time, and I remember there were some inmates that they would get to prison and they would wake up, make their bed, run in the yard, lift weights, or they don't have weights, they have water bottles, you know
right, right,
and some inmates would, because people are delusional about this, but there's more drugs in prison than there are in any neighborhood, and some would go the other way.
right.
And I always found that really fascinating. And I asked one inmate who was very regimented and very disciplined and really got his life together and used prison to turn his life around and rehabilitate. And he was a lifer. He was a lifer. So,
That's
you see,
strong-minded person. Strong-minded person.
yeah, you see lifers go one of two ways. They'll say, well, I'm serving life, so I don't care. I'm going to get high every day. I'm going to get in fights. I'm going to be violent. I'm going to mess with the correction officers, and I'm going to make everybody's life a living hell. And then you see lifers that are like, well, I'm serving life, so I'm never getting out of here, so I need to make the most out of it. And what is the difference between those two, which is very similar to what we were talking about, people who work out versus people who don't. And he said, I have no control over when I eat, when I sleep. I'm told what to do all day, every day. The only thing I can control is my physical well being. And I just was like, wow, like, you're serving life. Like, I don't even know if I could do that. He was lifting and running and meditating and going to school and taking a trade. And I thought, that's a whole nother level of,
Oh,
because you're never getting out. You're never getting out.
yeah, it's like,
So,
which is,
wow.
yeah, right. Which is interesting because you could, conversely, you take someone in a perfect environment, or what seems to be, when I say perfect, I
Right.
mean shelter, food, people who do care, and they're like,
Nurturing.
I can't do anything. I'm not motivated to do anything, and I don't want to contribute to the greater good of society, or whatever. And I'm saying aside from mental health issues, um, and I think that level that you just described is something truly extraordinary.
Agreed.
Truly extraordinary, really. Um,
Agreed. Because I like to think that I would be, well, I'd like to think I'm never going to serve life in prison, but I would like to think that if I were, I'd be that guy. But I don't know. Would I get a case of the F-its and be like, well, I'm never getting out, so I might as well make everybody else's life a living hell and get high and cause drama, cause ruckus. And sometimes I see them in the first 5-10 years of their sentence. They're the first guy, and then something happens, which happens to all of us, whether we're in prison or not. And then they kind of go, I don't want to live this way, even if I'm incarcerated. Let me, and that's always a magical moment
Oh yeah,
to
sure. I
anyone,
mean,
for anyone.
for sure. What you said spoke volumes to me when, he's a lifer, but he chooses to live his life with structure and add some sort of value to his surroundings, but and keep improving himself. Like those are his circumstances.
Yeah.
People realize, like, I even tell clients, they're like, I know I'm not pushing that hard. It's you. It's your body. It's your time. I can tell you what to do. I can
Yeah.
show you how to do it. I can clap. I can tell you how hard you should push, but ultimately it falls on you. It's your life. If you, and that's a client, if it's a team member or it's someone in the organization, if you don't want to do what you're supposed to do, you don't want to be responsible, you don't follow through on the things you're going to say, you're not a person of your word, that's you. It,
Yeah.
it, it harms you. It can definitely stall and fall on the team, and it could cause some chaos within the team. But ultimately, you have to deal with it. So do you think? And I've had conversations like this. The second you walk out of this building, that you're going to just be a lot better. Everything's going to be fine, and you're going. It's the job that's bad, and you don't like. I always say, you're going to take this into real estate. You're going to
Hmm.
take this into being a police officer, whatever it is. You are going to have to deal with this. And until you adjust these systems that you have, you're going to be toiling and fighting and saying it's this job. No, it's this job. Much like a relationship.
Right.
It was her fault. No, 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 it's her fault. No, it's her fault. I'm always dealing with this common denominator, right? So a lot of people don't want to deal with what's plaguing them or giving them the biggest challenges. And at some point, you have to say, you know what? Maybe it is me. Maybe I need to be better at this. And you know what? Maybe it's not right that I'm being negative towards this person, or I'm lacking self-awareness, or uh, I only have my needs in mind. Maybe that's not cool, and maybe that's why I'm getting weird energy from people. But as we've discussed, I'm not so sure there's a lot of people who are that self-aware to grab the bull by the horns and to make adjustments in their life, especially when they're in their 30s, 40s, and 50s.
No, I agree. And I'm a huge proponent of personal accountability. Actually, psychologists and therapists who coddle their patients are doing them a disservice. And I find, and they aggravate me. And some people say that I have a bit of a harsh, tough love way towards my patients. And of course, I have to because my patients are incarcerated. But I'm a big proponent of personal accountability. If things aren't going right in your life, the first thing you need to do is take a look in the mirror, because what role are you playing in that? And I didn't understand that. People who have what we now dub victim mentality are they're a victim of their own victim mentality. And I've seen people in the most horrific circumstances, abusive households, no nurturing, no money, no nothing, and still think, what can I do to make myself better? Now, I'm oversimplifying, barring people with major mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, things like that, people that are truly very mentally ill. I think we're kind of straying away from personal accountability. Mental health is being talked about and it's less stigmatized, which is great. But that doesn't mean you can just go, oh, well, I'm having a bad mental health day, so I give up. No, that's not how this works. You know what I mean? And the coddling and victim mentality kind of culture that I see a lot online is it's very it's doing these kids a disservice. It's doing ourselves a disservice. There's a balance.
Yeah, and I think correct me if I'm wrong, what you're referring to is sometimes I see the post, if I put something out there that's really sad, it's going to get a lot of attention. It's like, why would you want to put all of that out there? Like, why don't you just want to try to work through it and deal with it? And early on, I used to put stuff like that out there, and I went, wait a minute. I'm like, do I really want people to know that? Like, I want to work through it. That's my cross to bear. I want to try to deal with that before I put it out there. But I know that people, it's a sad story. It's a sad story. It's a sad story. It's being a victim, or being a victim in a problem that you created, and then they know that they're going to get a lot of
Yeah.
attention and a lot of comments and a lot of likes, and I'm always thinking, don't you want to work through that and persevere and be better? Like I just don't. I don't think it's a good look to constantly be a victim. I
No,
don't.
it's not a good look. And
Yeah.
also, you can be mentally ill and still live a fully functional life. And again, individualized. Some people don't have the resources. Some people don't have access to treatment or health insurance or all that kind of stuff. But it gives off this idea that, like, poor me, poor me, poor me. But yeah, horrible things can happen in life. I'm not discounting that. But when it's like you said, when you're taking it out into real estate or into the gym or in the relationships, and you fail to realize that the common denominator is you. Why are my relationships and work and gym, and why is my house a mess and I never do my laundry? Why is everything in my life effed up? Well, have you looked in the mirror? Because you might need to.
Mm,
And that's
mm.
hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's hard.
It's hard and I believe rare. Um,
Yeah.
Rare. I mean, there was a point many years ago where things were really not going well, and I realized, were there things that I didn't appreciate that happened that I didn't appreciate, and that, do I believe the behavior of others wasn't good? Yeah, I believe that, but more so it was the way I dealt with it. Right? We can
Mm.
choose how we respond to it. Right? We can certainly choose how we respond to things, but I had a question for you. You said early in the show, you said, you think that there are a lot of things, like the word depression is thrown around a little bit too often. I hear this word all the time, and I heard a Dr. Abigail, I forget her last name. She was talking about trauma, and everyone says, please. She gave an example. She was with someone, said, "Oh, don't drive that school by school because, man, I had serious trauma from that school." And the person was serious, and the doctor said, "Tell me about it." And it was her friend. She told her about it. She says, "That's not trauma. Like, if it was hard for you, there's no one can take that away from you and gaslight you and all those things.
Right.
But that's not trauma. That's a bad experience. You had a bad experience. You didn't like it. You don't want to have the experience again, but that doesn't mean it's trauma and you have significant trauma from it. It's like, I think that it's just a bad experience. You're allowed to have bad experiences. What are your thoughts on the word trauma?
Oh my God, I've made so many reels about that. It drives me nuts because I think we're in a culture now that we're over pathologizing everything, right? Uh, It's not, I was working at a high end mental health clinic, and this woman said, "I'm so traumatized. My husband took away my Mercedes." And I was like, "Okay, so let's I was like, "Okay, let's stop right there because your husband taking away your Mercedes is not trauma." And I don't ever want to be dismissive, trauma is subjective, but I've had people that have been, and not to get harsh, but have been stabbed and raped and had childhood abuse and been in war, in combat, actual combat, and they are traumatized. That's trauma.
Yeah.
The word trauma is thrown around too much. The word anxiety, the word depression. People want to pathologize everything because when they pathologize everything, it makes it not their fault. It's not my fault. Or even ADHD, you don't have ADHD. You just don't want to sit down and study, and I'm
Yeah,
not
of
saying
course.
ADHD doesn't exist. It does. I do ADHD evaluations all the time. But in order to be diagnosed with ADHD, you have to undergo a full neuropsychological assessment, which takes hours. It's not just, oh my God, I pick up my phone every 5 minutes. I have ADHD. No, you're just undisciplined. And some people are not going to like that I say that, but it's
Mhm.
it's the truth. And
Mhm.
and I think trauma is one of the words that is thrown around all the time, and it's dismissive to people who have actually had horrific trauma. And a
Mhm.
lot of people have had horrific trauma. So my favorite Starbucks shut down. I'm traumatized. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I do. That was very helpful, and that certainly was useful information. Thank you so much. I think that word is thrown around a ton, and you know, I also heard someone say, you know, we know it's not good practice to say whatever the worst thing that ever happened to you is the worst thing that ever happened to you. I can't tell you what that is. You know what it
Right.
is. I don't know what it is. But at the same time, it was really powerful when you said, when we put that label on it and we put it in a category or a box, then I know it's not my responsibility to deal with.
Right.
Because it's trauma, or I have ADHD, or I have this. Look, just because if let's say you do have trauma or you do have ADHD, I think it's still our responsibility to do our best to gather information and knowledge and work through it. And if you can work through it, you will have a better understanding, thus, you will have a better life, period. So you can
Correct.
be well equipped to deal with the ups and downs of whatever it is you're dealing with. That's
Correct.
it.
And one of my favorite lines is, uh, what happened to you is not your fault, but healing is your responsibility.
That's
And
great.
that's a tough pill to swallow, no pun intended. But I have had, like I said, I remember having suicidal thoughts at age 9. I didn't know what suicide was, but I remember thinking I want to be dead. Thank God I had supportive parents who got me into mental health treatment and all that kind of stuff. And I practice what I preach. I don't miss a session with my therapist. I've been in therapy pretty much my whole entire life. Um, I make sure that exercise is part of my life because it's not just the physical, but it's the mental. You know
Mhm.
that better than me. I leave a session. I've never left a session feeling worse, ever. I've never left the gym feeling worse. Is it hard some days to get up? 90% of the battle is getting there. Sure.
Oh,
But, do I try to eat right? Yes. Do I try to, do I not do drugs or drink or party, or do I prioritize my sleep? Do I work hard? Yeah, I do all those things because I know that I have this propensity to go down this kind of dark path,
mhm.
and sometimes it comes out of nowhere, and it's not my fault. It's not my fault, but it is my responsibility to call somebody and say, hey, whether it's my therapist, my friend, my mentor, my trainer. I even there was a time when I was my father died a couple years ago, and Miguel knew about it, and he made sure that I had extra sessions for about a month because he
Mhm.
knew I was having a tough time getting out of bed. I was grieving, which is normal.
Yeah.
But I know I've put Miguel on a platform, but it's such a big. He knew, and he didn't have to say or talk about it. He just said, we're come again tomorrow, and I'm thinking, tomorrow? We just trained 2 days in a row. Just be here tomorrow at 9. And I was so grateful for that.
Yeah, that
I was grieving, but I had one thing to look forward to.
right. I
You
mean,
know,
once again, this is I don't mind it being the Miguel podcast, but shout out to Miguel for having the awareness. I mean, it seems, you know, you said that he didn't ask, he just knew, right? He didn't talk about it, you didn't request it, he just knew. But you know what? A lot of people don't have the proactive thinking to understand that, I don't know if this is exactly what she needs, but she needs something like this. So just get your butt here and make sure we do another session. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think that's a skill set. Like, it's hard to have
absolutely.
social awareness if you don't have self awareness, because if you're not self aware, you can't focus on the needs of other people.
Correct.
Or you don't care. I just don't
Or
care.
you don't care.
Right. And by the way, that in itself speaks volumes of what your personality type is without
Totally.
using any labels. That's a part of that. Correct me if I'm wrong. Like,
Totally.
if you're aware of them but you just don't care, I mean, you are who you are, right? It's like there's a reason that you should care about the greater good and the people you're around. You should care,
Agreed.
and
Agreed.
I
And
think
and if you are that selfish of a person, then maybe some fields aren't for you. You're not meant to be a trainer or a psychologist. Maybe go be, I don't know, a Wall Street broker. Not saying there's anything wrong with Wall Street brokers, but maybe you shouldn't be working in the human helping kind of capacity.
yeah,
Um,
but I mean, whatever. Like, I think that, and I was driving towards something when you said before. Look, I try to get my, you said before, Dr. Haji, I try to get my sleep. I don't miss training. I don't put these things in my body. You know what I
Yeah.
was thinking? I was thinking along the lines of people. Like there are certain people and certain energies that I can't do it, man. Like I can't be around you. I can't be around you because sometimes it's the person who's woe is me, who's always complaining, always telling a sad story, or the person who just is so delusional or utterly selfish that I don't even want to risk the possibility of getting that behavior on me, right? Like who,
100%.
yeah, who you are, that's cool. I don't knock it. I'm not judging it, but selfishly, I don't want to be around it, right? And then that's what keeps my mind healthy and keeps me in a good place. Like I I've heard people have called me before, like they're like, you're really introverted, and I think I'm not introverted.
Yep.
I'm introverted around you because
Same.
I do not want
Same.
to talk. And I'm like, it's common sense. If every time I open my mouth and I say something and it's met with like this sarcasm or passive aggressive or weird I'm like, guess what? I'm introverted now. Yeah, I'm introverted.
100%. And it's funny because I was a party animal in my 20s and now I'm literally, home at I go to bed early and I stay at home with my cat and I'm pretty much a homebody.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are like, yeah, and yes, I need to work on that too. You need to socialize, you need to be around humans, you need to have friends. And I'm a go hard or go home person, so I can easily sit on my couch for a week watching Netflix, which is also not good. But I agree and I think that comes with age and experience. Because, in my 20s, I'm like, I have 40 best friends. No, you don't have 40 best friends. You have maybe one or two, and then you turn 30 and then you turn 40 and you realize your boundaries or most healthy, adaptive individuals, you learn that your boundaries, it's not selfish. I don't need to mess up my mental space with I can't afford that. I have too much going on for me. I have too many positive values in my life. I have too many positive people in my life. I can't be around it. Even sometimes I get asked to go out and I'm not 70, so yeah, I'll go to a club every now and then. And if somebody pulls out a bag of blow, I'm leaving.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't care. I don't care that you're doing blow. That's fine. I'm not saying I was perfect in my 20s, but I gotta go. I'm not. I don't. For me, I'm not. We're not doing that at this point in my life, and I'm okay with that. I'm
right.
okay putting that boundary very clear.
Mhm, mhm. Awesome. So when we started off, we started talking about personalities and what drives people to be committed and have discipline and not have discipline. Um, Now, personality types, I just wanted you to break them down a little bit so we get an understanding and we can talk about the thing that we talked about previously, which is, it's a bit of a spectrum component. So you have, these are the ones that I hear often.
Okay.
Not, I'm not called, but I hear often. There's, people who are psychopath, sociopath, the disorders, the ADHD, the bipolar, narcissism. Can you kind of tighten these up a little bit and give us the definitions
Yeah.
or,
Okay, so basically, there are different types of mental illnesses, right? There are psychiatric disorders that are essentially neurological in nature. That's your ADHD, autism, schizophrenia, bipolar. There's evidence that depression and true depression, anxiety, true anxiety, those are neurological in nature. Then you have what we call personality disorders, which are a pervasive pattern of characterological traits. So, narcissistic personality disorder, which is another term that's thrown around a lot. People say, "Oh, my ex cheated on me. He's a narcissist," and I'm like, "No, not necessarily. He can be an a-hole, but it doesn't mean he's a narcissist." Narcissists are people. Narcissistic personality disorder is someone who it stems from insecurity, really, ironically. They require excessive admiration. They have very little empathy, lack of remorse. They're kind of willing to step over other people to get their needs met. I mean, narcissists, you can usually tell them pretty quickly. They're not very likable to be around. It's all about self-serving.
but don't you have, I'm sorry, I know you're
Yeah.
flowing, but don't you have you have grandiose, you have malignant, you have covert, What would the difference be on the subcategories?
So the subcategories aren't really, rooted in empirical science, but we use them loosely because so grandiose is exactly what it sounds like. This is somebody who, as soon as they walk in the room, they're telling you all their accomplishments, whether they're real or fake. They're talking. It's me, 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 me. This is what I've done. This is what I've achieved. This is what I drive. This is my watch. That's just very grandiosity. It's exactly what it sounds like. These kind of delusions of grandeur of like, oh, I don't know if you know this, but I'm going to be the next, I don't know, the next owner of the Dolphins, and it's like completely out there, like something just grandiose. Malignant is just really refers to toxic, which is another term that's overused, but it's toxic. This is your guy that will probably engage in gaslighting and making you feel like you're crazy, and probably um, emotionally abusive relationships, and just probably high on psychopathy, which I can talk about into covert. Covert is more somebody who's sneaky about it. Somebody who you're like, hey, that's a kind of likable guy, and he kind of keeps to himself, and then a couple weeks later, you're like, whoa, that was somebody who's more manipulative, somebody who's very slick with it, and I've seen some of those that they can come. Sometimes narcissists can come off very likable and very
Well,
personable and very
they're
charming.
but thank you.
Yeah,
What I studied was they're incredibly charming,
usually.
and they usually make other people feel great.
Oh, they can.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They can.
When that person is the supply, right?
I was just going to say, but it's always self-serving, right?
Mhm.
So they'll tell a woman you're beautiful. They might shower her with gifts. They might do something like that. And there are female narcissists too. Do not get it wrong. But I'm using males as an example. But what is the end game? The end game is always self-serving. Either they want the trophy wife, or they want to sleep with her, or they want to control her, or something. There's the end game is always self-serving.
Mhm.
That's how narcissists operate. It's always about them. Even
And it,
if it's like their children, that might buy them the best toys. Why? It's not about the kids having the best toys. It's because it makes them look good, keeping
mhm.
up with the Joneses or whatever.
Okay. Now, is it possible for? I've heard before that um, narcissists don't have the ability to care about anyone else, and I know it stems from childhood and stems from relationship with parents and it stems from insecurity. But is it they don't you can't learn your way or therapy your way out of that? Is that correct?
It's very, very hard to treat narcissistic personality disorder because the entire disorder revolves around there's nothing wrong with me, everything is wrong with everybody else. So why do people go to therapy? Usually because they're feeling some kind of distress or pain or hurt, right? That's a motivator to say, damn, I need to call a mental health professional, see what's going on. But a narcissist isn't going to feel any of that because there's nothing wrong with them. You guys are the problem. It's the government, it's the credit card company, it's my boss, it's my wife, it's my job. Everything is wrong with everybody else. I'm perfect. So narcissists are very unlikely to voluntarily come into treatment. Usually narcissists come into treatment by way of the court. It's usually court mandated,
Oh,
or
interesting.
it's a custody battle or something to that effect. Yeah, it's very, very hard to treat because you have to have insight. And by definition of narcissistic personality disorder, they don't have insight because there's nothing wrong with them.
And correct me if I'm wrong, they have to have remorse.
Correct. And empathy.
Yeah.
And that's lacking. It's literally, we have the diagnostic statistic manual of mental disorders, which somewhere in there. Um, by definition, they lack remorse and empathy. And
Okay.
so, how do you cultivate that? You can't. You can't. And if you teach them what empathy and remorse looks like, a lot of the times they mimic what empathy and remorse looks like in order to further manipulate people and use it to their advantage.
Yeah.
So
Because
it's that's
yeah, they know
dangerous.
what it should look like, and they say things to make sure that they seem or come off a certain way, knowing that that's the right thing to say.
Correct.
Right.
So it's the same with psychopaths, and we about 20, 30 years ago, the treatment for psychopaths was psychopaths in prison was
Shock treatment.
no, it was insight oriented treatment. So we were teaching them empathy and remorse, and the studies found that we were making them worse psychopaths because they were learning to mimic empathy and remorse. And then they would go up to the parole board and be like, I'm so sorry. And I can't believe I did that to my victim. And they were getting paroled, and then they were reoffending because they had learned to mimic remorse and empathy because it's part of the psychopathy, part of the narcissism. And it's I mean, I read studies about that all day. It's fascinating to me. I'm actually a qualified continuing education provider in Florida on psychopathy. So if anyone's interested, take my webinar on psychopathy.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where can they find that?
On my website, it's risepsychological.com. Just go to webinars. There's one on psychopathy and one on malingering, which is faking mental illness. Those are my two areas of expertise.
Interesting. Very interesting. So a psychopath, what's the difference between a psychopath and a sociopath?
That's my favorite question. So we used to differentiate between psychopaths and sociopaths because psychopaths were considered born that way, and sociopaths, sociological, were considered made that way as a product of their environment. So sociopath is actually an incorrect, outdated term because the research really points to a biopsychosocial model of psychopathy, which means there are biological components, there are psychological components, there are sociological components. So sociopath is actually I actually cringe when I hear that. It's an outdated term. We also used to use the term sociopath to differentiate between psychopathy and psychosis. Psychosis is what schizophrenic people experience. It's a disconnect with reality, hearing voices, seeing things, delusional. So sociopath is no longer the term. It's actually psychopath.
Okay. Okay, understood. And then I remember a football player one time, and I'm just completely using you for as an encyclopedia, and I appreciate it. But a football player said that he was his best when he was in a manic state on the field. And I was thinking, that sounds pretty aggressive.
Yeah.
And I kind of get it, but I want you to break it down for me and for everyone listening.
Yeah, so another term that's used wrongly is bipolar disorder. People think bipolar disorder is mood swings. It's not. Mood swings is just called life. Everybody has mood swings. Some people have low frustration tolerance. In other words, they don't tolerate frustration well, and so they become angry and irritable. Bipolar disorder is actually very different. It's a period of mania, which is what you just discussed, which requires being awake for 4 days minimum without being tired. And when you're manic, you're kind of you're a little bit grandiose. You usually have more energy. Some people become psychotic, hear voices and see things. You tend to have a lot of goal-oriented behavior. You tend to engage in risk-taking behavior. So you might decide, I'm going to go jump out of a plane, or I'm going to go smoke meth, or I'm going to go drive at my Ferrari at 400 miles per hour. So that's mania. Mania is really a period of 4 days or more of just complete, I'm awake and I'm not tired, typically followed by dips into extreme depression, like an absolute inability to get up, to motivate, suicidal thoughts, crying, and things like that. So it makes sense that he would say, if he was truly bipolar, or that he would say, I'm at my best when I'm manic, because that's when you're essentially have a motor. You're going.
It's like superhuman almost.
Yeah, it is. It is superhuman almost. I've seen bipolar patients in manic states where we've had to give them a shot to calm them down because they were a danger to themselves and others.
So would that mean, Dr. Haji, that maybe when they're manic, their dopamine is super high, followed by the extreme dip when it gets super low, then they fall into depression, right?
Correct. So true bipolar disorder, again, because people throw that term around, I'm moody, I'm bipolar. No, that's not what that is. Yeah, neurologically, I mean, this is why they have to be on what we call mood stabilizers. Really the treatment of choice for bipolar disorder, as much as people don't want to hear it, is psychotropic medication, because it is a imbalance in the brain. like you said, there's dopamine and serotonin is super high and your brain is flooded with it. So you're like you said, you're like superhuman.
I'm sorry.
No, all good. And then when that manic period is over, typically you dip into depression, and it's the opposite, and it can be just as horrific because
Mhm.
can you imagine living your life like? I mean, it's
No, no, no. I mean, I think that's the very reason why, I did something recently, the cold plunge for 60 days, and I did it purely to see if my testosterone would change. Because
yeah, I saw that. I'm so proud.
yeah, I'm going to get the blood work results soon, and then I'll put it up. But I was told, and look, I've already done this, so I know that the blood work after 60 days, doing cold water immersion prior to weightlifting, it boosted my testosterone like call it 500 points. It just did without taking testosterone at all.
You said before working out.
Before,
Oh, right,
before,
right, 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 right. Because I always
and
do it after.
everyone, it was really common to come into a fitness facility if you had both. I mean, anatomy certainly, I'm biased toward it because it's such a wonderful place, but it's got we have the therapy and the recovery modalities inside. Most people would train hard and then they do the recovery modalities, but what they didn't know is that anyone in the science knows that you're halting, stalling, or uh, halting the um, adaptations that are happening from training. But with that, when you, it's really come down to what happens to the cellular health. But when you're cold before training, in simple terms, you have more staying power in training, so you can train for a little bit longer, a little bit harder, do a few more sets, and that helps you push more. When you can push more, your testosterone goes up, right? Um, After, the reason testosterone was going down if you trained and then went in the cold plunge is because all the things that you work so hard to create in training, you're basically making sure they don't continue by freezing yourself and slowing down blood flow, right? Restricting blood flow. And, but to be honest, the reason I love cold plunge so much is because of the dopamine hit. When I go in the cold plunge and I get out, my wife goes, "You're like a different person." And I'm like, "Yeah, I feel amazing. I accomplished something. It was hard. It's a bit funny, but then when I get out, I'm like, I have a dopamine hit." So I think training, cold plunging, being around like-minded people, positive people, people who are genuine, people who truly support you, people who want to see you do well, want to see you win. These are all things that are really going to help you tremendously when it comes to anything. I'm not sure about some of these disorders that you can't really work your way out of, but I think in general, yeah, it's easy for you to go down a rabbit hole of negativity if you're
Mm-hmm.
not doing these positive things. So it behooves
Mm-hmm.
you to, train every day. I know someone who walks 15, 20,000 steps a day, and she said, "I just feel great when I do it."
Yeah.
And she looks great, and I'm thinking, you know, it's she's outside, it feels good, she's moving, sunlight, exercise, energy, and I'm thinking it's like the perfect cocktail of a positive habit.
Yeah, and it's not always easy, even for somebody like not to toot my own horn, but I consider myself a relatively high functioning person, but there are a lot of times where if I work a lot from home now because I'm not in the prisons full time. I have my own practice. There are some days where I live across from a park, and I've told myself every day, Lina, in the afternoon you're going to go for a walk in the park. I've told myself
Mm.
that every day for 5 years, and I think I've done it maybe 3 times, right? So I have to be, yeah, I'm not, I claim to be all disciplined and go hard or go home, but there are certain things where I really struggle with. And I think one of the reasons I invest in training is because, again, the structure. I have to be there at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. or whatever. Whereas the park, Lina, today you're going to walk in the park. I dismiss that. I'll turn on Netflix. I'm human. I mess that up a lot every day.
Right.
But with the cold plunge, I love that you brought that up because last year I had a period of obsessing with the cold plunge, where I know that I still have that go hard or go home mentality. I was obsessed with the cold plunge. I was doing it every day. I was up to 3-4 minutes. I was so proud of myself. And I was noticing actually that when I left the gym, I had a decrease in anxiety. And I had this I unfortunately I did read also the research that says you should do it before working out, and I didn't never got to that point. I was doing it after working out, and actually Miguel was like, "Stop! You need to do it before." And I was like, "Listen, baby steps."
Yeah.
And so I would leave anatomy, and I would be energized without anxiety, just like calm but ready to go. It was I got to get back to cold plunge. It was, I don't care if it was placebo effect. Or if it was real. It
Yeah.
works.
Yeah, we always say if yeah, I was talking about this yesterday with someone in the field, and I said, look, if do you feel good? And
Yeah.
they feel amazing. I'm like, I really this it's not even worth debating. If you feel great, and if it's not, I'm just saying hypothetically, it's not ruining your health, deteriorating your organs, you should keep doing it. Like that.
Agreed.
That is what it is. I mean, it's. I think there's a lot to. And by the way, the reason that you getting that effect is because when you get in the cold plunge, it's shocking. So
Right.
it's like, oh my goodness, fight or flight.
Right.
After you get out, it takes you into the parasympathetic, which is calm.
I love
So
it.
that was real, and you were feeling something significant. You got a dopamine hit,
Yeah.
taken back to the parasympathetic, and you were like, "Why do I feel better?"
Yeah.
Because you're in the parasympathetic, and that's one
Yeah.
of the other things that we discuss often. Training is like beast mode, beast mode, beast mode. Push yourself. Caffeine, pre-workouts. It's like, okay, that's a box. I understand what that is. I've lived a lot of my life in that box, but then it's we really need to figure out how we can push ourselves back into the parasympathetic because maybe 20% of our life is in the fight or flight.
Right.
80's got to be in the parasympathetic because what we need is to be in a recovery state where I'm healing, where I'm feeling better, where my body is becoming its best self through the natural processes, not in fight or flight, but in the parasympathetic.
Yeah. And I think, and I need to practice what I preach as well, but I meditate. I was not raised religious. My parents were actually violently anti-religious, but I believe in God, and I pray. I pray every morning and every night. I meditate. I read. Sometimes I relax by watching true crime, but whatever works for me. I think those things are also not discussed enough because I can go hard. I can go beast mode in the gym, but I also have to, sleep, eat a
Yeah,
cookie every now and then,
right.
meditate, read, all those things that it's just everything in moderation is really such a good motto
Mm-hmm.
um, that people don't practice enough,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
I appreciate that. I can certainly appreciate that. Listen, I know there's 100 topics that we could talk about, and I could certainly talk all day. And I can't thank you enough for being on. All the
Thank
information has
you.
been amazing. Just in closing, are there any? Uh, the first question would be: are there any books that you strongly suggest in regarding? And when I say regarding, like understanding yourself, people understanding personality types. In my field, I'm in the service industry. We have a special culture at anatomy, but it's really helpful to understand personality types. But I think that starts with yourself. You have to understand yourself first. So, are there any books in general that you strongly suggest when person understanding behavior or psychology of themselves or different personality types?
God, I can't think of any off the top of my head because I have so many and they're so school related. So I want to make
Mhm.
sure I don't give anything too textbookish. But
Okay.
who, one great book that I tell everybody to read is called An Unquiet Mind.
Okay.
It's a psychologist. She is a psychologist with bipolar disorder, and she talked
Wow.
about how she resisted getting treatment because kind of what your teammate said, she thrived off of the mania. That's how she got
Yeah.
her PhD. That's how she got published. She would do all that when she was manic.
Yeah.
And it talks about kind of having to grieve, saying goodbye to the mania because Anyway, I don't want to break. An Unquiet Mind by Dr.
Okay.
Jameson is fantastic for anyone.
Okay.
And I'll get back to you on a couple others. I'll send you a message, but because I
Okay.
can't think of them off the top of my head. But I have a few.
No, that's perfect. Thank you very much. Can you tell the audience where they can reach out to you if they have questions, if they want to contact you, I guess your social media handles, your website information?
Yeah, my IG is rise underscore psychological underscore services. I am on a true crime show on Amazon Prime. It's called The World's Most Evil Prisoners. So those of you who are into true crime, I think I'm on episode 1 through 6, and I'm filming season 2 now. And there's a couple others. One of them is supposed to come out on Netflix, so hopefully that'll happen. But
Okay.
yeah, so if you're into serial killers and psychopaths, world's most evil prisoners. And then my website is risepsychological.com. There's some cool stuff on there, some webinars on different types of mental health. And yeah, that's pretty
Okay.
much it. I can't
Well,
thank you enough for having me. I could talk about this stuff all day. So,
no,
and
this
I love, I really respect, you know, everything you've done for me, your
no,
gym, your trainers, your body architects, your sauna, your cold plunge. I mean, anatomy is such a huge part of my life. It's kept me going through some very, very difficult times in the last few years.
well, I'm so happy to hear that because that's why we exist and we have an incredible team. Everyone from business partners to the team, they're all caring people, and it means a lot to add positive value to your life, right?
Yeah,
And you have a good place to go. And once again, Miguel is amazing. So hopefully,
Miguel is amazing.
he really is. He's such a good person, and
He is.
I just know, like, when you know someone has a good heart.
Yes.
He's got a good heart. He loves doing what he does, and he does it well. And you're proof of that. She works really hard, guys. I know everyone's listening here, but she works really hard. She trains hard, and there's a back and forth with Miguel, and that could be a TV show. That could
That
be a
could
great TV show. So, thank you once again. Have an amazing day.
you too.